Hello, I'm Jack Fink, and you're watching Eye on Politics on CBS News, Dallas-Fort Worth. We begin with the building controversy over the busing of migrants from Texas to other cities across the country. Democrats, including President Joe Biden, have sharply criticized Governor Greg Abbott and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis for sending asylum seekers by bus or plane to Vice President Kamala Harris's official residence and Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts. The governors and Republicans are pushing back, including Senator John Cornyn, who says transporting migrants across the country is not new.
In fact, the Biden administration has been doing it all along. Here's a chart that shows the cities that have been receiving migrants from the Biden administration since the president became president of the United States in January of 2021.
Instead of working with us on solutions, Republicans are playing politics with human beings, using them as props. What they're doing is simply wrong. It's un-American. It's reckless.
But why don't they care about the Texas towns that are literally facing millions? You go to the valley and every hospital bed is full, every prison is full, the schools are overflowing, and the administration's policy is just to allow it wide open.
And they were just literally dumped like human garbage in front of the vice president's house. That's un-Christian, un-Texan, un-American, and something that should not be allowed.
A group of migrants who were voluntarily flown by the state of Florida from San Antonio to Martha's Vineyard have filed suit against Governor Ron DeSantis, claiming they were deceived. DeSantis has denied that. The Bexar County Sheriff also has launched an investigation to see if any laws were violated. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton has criticized the investigation as grandstanding. Now to the latest on the Texas governor's race and a new poll of registered voters by the Dallas Morning News and UT Tyler. It shows Governor Greg Abbott with a 9 percentage point lead over Democrat Beto O'Rourke, 47 to 38%. But when the poll asked likely voters, the governor's numbers increased to an 11 percentage point lead, 50 to 39%. To talk more about this race and other key statewide contests, we spoke with Rebecca Dean. She's the Associate Dean of Academic Affairs at the College of Liberal Arts at UT Arlington.
So when you look at likely voters and then almost certain voters, they tend to skew more conservative and more Republican. And the reason for that is historical turnout data. So if you look at who is most likely to vote, especially in non-presidential elections, it tends to be the habitual voters, the people who, if it's election day, I'm headed to the polls. And so when you screen for that, often you get people who are a little bit older, tends to be a little bit more of a white demographic, and a little bit of a more homeowner embedded in their community. And those are the groups that Republicans have really targeted, especially here in Texas, over time. And then if you compare that with the Democratic coalition, there's just there are fewer of those folks in that group. And so that's why you see that it's not atypical of polls over time.
And, you know, some of the interesting things that we're seeing is in men, Governor Abbott has always led, but in women, there have been some disparities in the polls. Some give Beto O'Rourke a sizable increase over Governor Abbott. And in others, in the most recent one by the Morning News, it was close. It was Governor Abbott had a small lead over Beto O'Rourke. Was that surprising?
Not really. There tends to be a gender gap on most candidates and political issues. It tends to track along partisan lines. So in this particular governor's race, it's a highly partisan environment. That's true, full stop. It's just a highly partisan environment these days, but also in this particular race. If you think about Republican reaction to Beto O'Rourke, it's baked in. It's unlikely that you're going to get very strongly Republican voters to change their mind. And then if you think about the issues on which Governor Abbott is quite strong, specifically security and immigration and the border, those tend to be issues that are of higher priority among men. Now, that's a gross generalization. That's not to say every man feels that way and every woman doesn't feel that way. But if you just look at general trends, it doesn't necessarily surprise me that that Governor Abbott is polling more highly among men. It is a little interesting that there's that variation among women. It could be the difference in the sampling technique, as we talked about a moment ago with the most recent poll, the one where there's the smaller gap among women between the two candidates being the one that's also polling certain voters, voters that are most certainly going to go to the polls. So this is in line with other kinds of gender gaps that we've seen in other places and over time.
And you said the phrase baked in, and I'm wondering, as far as the way the polls are, is this, I mean, is it pretty much set? I mean, because obviously this is still the Republicans' race to lose, whether it's the governor, it's really the whole, from really down the ballot. And so I'm wondering, is it pretty much baked in yet, or is there still a chance? I know next week is their one and only debate between the governor and Beto O'Rourke. And so I'm wondering, is this really his last chance to try to change the dynamic of the race?
Well, it is the last chance for him to change the focus and attention of what's being talked about in the political space. And so when I say it's baked in, I mean among the voters who are certain to go to the polls. So among strong Republicans, among strong Democrats, their views are super clear. If you think about Governor Abbott's recent busing of migrants to Washington, D.C., to Chicago, Republicans like it, Democrats don't, right? If you think about O'Rourke's stances on gun control over time and things that he said, Democrats like it, Republicans don't. But those are the far ends of that partisan spectrum. So what O'Rourke has to do is to mobilize and energize the people who maybe haven't decided if they're going to vote at all. And then if they're going to vote, to go and vote for him. So that kind of strategy means that he has to do two things. He has to energize the people who are predisposed to vote for him. And so talking about things like school safety and framing gun control in that space of school safety, criticizing the governor for whether or not it's humane treatment of migrants rather than talking about border security and immigration writ large. Those are the ways that he can potentially move the needle. As you say, though, it's Governor Abbott's to lose, and it's a heavy lift for O'Rourke.
Yeah, because I mean, you really have to make the case to voters to replace someone. And when you look at the economy nationally, of course, there's a lot of problems with inflation. Everybody feels it. But the state of Texas, when it comes to jobs, has outperformed the rest of the country. And so I'm wondering, does that kind of give the governor a built-in advantage? Because the perception and the data show that Texas is doing better than the rest of the country economically.
It's interesting because, typically we think about midterm elections in the congressional space as a referendum on the president. And so national economy doing poorly, that suggests that maybe Republicans are going to have a good year and the party not in power tends to have a good year anyway. When we're thinking about the incumbent governor, though, you're right, we do think about the way in which the economy and other contextual variables are doing in the state. And again, Governor Abbott is popular among the people who are most likely to vote. So I don't necessarily think that let me phrase it this way. In other circumstances, I would say that the national forces, we've just seen a lot of nationalization of politics, right? So you see national issues and things that are in top of mind for voters trickle down all the way to the local level. I think, though, in this case, Texas has plenty of issues in front of it. The tragic school shootings happened in Texas. We border Mexico, right? I mean, a lot of these national issues have a very state-focused implication. And so I do think that the way that the governor has behaved on these issues and has policies on these issues either resonate or they don't. And then it goes back to the partisanship that I mentioned earlier.
And then the other thing that Democrats have really tried to seize on this year is the abortion issue, because of the state law in Texas that went into effect just in the last several weeks with regard to banning most of the abortions. And so the Democrats are trying to seize upon that. And we've seen that in the campaigns, particularly of Beto O'Rourke and also the Attorney General candidate, Rochelle Garza.
That's right. And, when the Dobbs decision came down, one of the things that a lot of political scientists were talking about was the lag time between the decision and election. And a lot of folks immediately said, oh my goodness, what effect is this going to have on the election? And voters' attention span is limited. They're busy living their lives and doing their business. So the attention that they actually pay to politics is a relatively small, if you think about it like bandwidth, right? Small amount. And so there's only space for several issues. And so the question was going to be, well, were there going to be other issues that would overtake this abortion issue? And what's been interesting is its staying power. And here's a space where I do think that potentially something happening at the national level might have an impact. And that was Senator Lindsey Graham from South Carolina, his suggestion introducing a bill that would ban abortions after, I believe it was 15 weeks.
Yeah.
But but what I mean there is that reinvigorates the discussion about abortion. And, abortion views are complicated, a little less so in Texas, but still, there are folks who might personally oppose abortion, but see a total ban as not something that they can support. And so I think that's one of the reasons why you see O'Rourke in the places that he's campaigning on college campuses, for example, and all across the state. So I think he is trying to capitalize on that. Now, the degree to which he'll be successful remains to be seen, but it doesn't necessarily surprise me.
I was just going to ask you about that, because when you look at the polls, and he does better, O'Rourke does better with younger people. And as people get older, as you mentioned, they prefer Abbott. And if you look at, where voters are, the rural areas back the governor, suburban even backs the governor a little bit. But then when you go to urban areas, O'Rourke has a very sizable lead over the governor. And so I'm wondering, we just saw O'Rourke complete a 49-day, 5,600-mile trek around Texas, and hitting a lot of these rural areas, try to mine as many votes as possible. Was that the right strategy? And do you think he needs to really focus on running up the number of people who vote in the large cities, which are largely Democratic?
I think he's trying a both and strategy. I think that I don't consult for the campaign, I'm not a mind reader, but my guess is that there's a hope that by doing the unexpected, he gets the kind of coverage we're talking about it right now. And so he has then the reach into the urban areas, because you're right, he does need to run up the score in the urban areas, just as the lieutenant governor wants to run up the score in the rural areas. But he's also trying to maintain that attention, because where does the coverage hit? In the urban areas, right? I mean, that's where the media centers are. And then the other thing that you think about with that strategy, especially with regard to the college voters, many of them might be registered back home, which all over the state, right? So in terms of, it's not like a districted race, right? Like a state Senate race or a congressional race, because it's statewide. If they're Texas voters, he's just going to reach them wherever they are, right? So he wants to grab media attention, because that's inexpensive, right? Compared with running ads. And there's been some media coverage of the ways in which the governor was running ads early and uncontested by O'Rourke. Well, my guess is he's saving his money, and we'll see much more ads now. So he's, in other words, concentrating the expensive things right before the election and doing inexpensive things that he still hopes will garner media support, media attention.
You mentioned the Lieutenant Governor, Dan Patrick, and he has been on this 131 stop bus tour in the rural areas of the state. Do you think that's a good idea?
I do. I do. Now you have less of a probability of voter fall off the ballot. In other words, that they would, vote for the governor's race and then not vote for anything down ballot. So, what the lieutenant governor is hoping that the folks who are already out there to vote, which again are most likely to be voters in support of him, um, that he wants to increase the probability that more of them show up. And so he's really not trying to change people's minds. He's just trying to make sure that his voters show up en masse. And he has a different sort of appeal than Governor Abbott. He has a different sort of coalition behind him. So it doesn't surprise me that he's not not putting in resources where he's very unlikely to garner extra votes.
And so it's basically shoring up your firewall against the large vote against you in the large area, in the urban areas.
That's
Is that right?
exactly so. Yep, that's exactly so.
And then let me ask you about the Attorney General's race. We tried to interview the Attorney General, Ken Paxton, several weeks ago when he was campaigning at a Collin County Republican event on Labor Day. They weren't doing interviews. He spoke and addressed the crowd and mentioned that to him, this is an election about what he believed was saving the country from going in the wrong direction. And his polls, yes, he has a lot of legal baggage between his felony charges and the reported FBI investigation against him on bribery allegations. Of course, he's denied any wrongdoing. But in the polls, he seems to have a 5 or anywhere from a 2 to 5 point lead, but then it grows to a 7 or 8 point lead when you look at the more certain voters. Do you think he's in decent shape, or do you think he's in trouble?
This race is one that's of interest across the nation because it's befuddling, right? You would think that someone with that much legal haze around him would be vulnerable. If we were writing a political science textbook, we would say this is the kind of candidate who's vulnerable. And sure, his polling's a little lower than it used to be, but again, it's his to lose. And I think that just speaks to the way that Ken Paxton has been around for a long time, and people's opinion of and these charges have spanned a fair amount of time. And so people have made up their mind. People who are most likely to vote have made up their mind, and they're fairly unwavering. I think also, if we were to rank these in adjacency to former President Trump's style, that Paxton probably would be closest, and then Patrick pretty close, following. And then you've seen Governor Abbott really moderate his behavior and become much more overtly conservative. He's always been conservative, of course, but doing more clearly conservative, clearly tapping into social concerns, trying to appeal to the people who also supported former President Trump. And so it doesn't surprise me then that A.G. Paxton is not taking interviews and just proceeding as he's always proceeded. It's won for him, right? It's been a good strategy for him. Why would he change it?
And he was able to survive the primary where he had 3 Republicans, well known in their own right, really attacking him and his ethics and his integrity. And he survived that.
That's right. If we were to have seen him be unsuccessful, that's where it would have been.
And I did want to ask you about, we always hear about, well, historically, we've heard about people after the primaries, they try to move to the center, but I don't know that we've really seen that this time around. And yet more people are considering themselves independent. So how do they square the two? Because I think when you look at what the candidates' messages are, Abbott is appealing to very conservative people, and O'Rourke is certainly appealing to progressives and Democrats. and they certainly want independence, but at the end of the day, they still have to rely on their core voters, right?
That's right. And, this is really a conversation that's happening at the national level as well. And I'm talking here among the Republicans and in the Republican Party, the national level and across states. Um, what is the winning strategy for Republicans? Is it to follow the demographic trends and to try to peel off voters of color, either in the Latino community or in the African American community, Asian community, and sort of be a little bit more strategic in how they use that appeal, perhaps social conservatism among voters of color who are also people of faith, and that might appeal, but maybe moderating their stance a little bit on immigration to try to have a more bipartisan, comprehensive solution. And they had that conversation after during the Obama years, and the very famous autopsy, right, at the national level on what the Republican Party had done wrong. Then along comes President Trump, and upends that apple cart. And he has shown a playbook, a successful playbook, and I think that Republicans across the country have made a decision that the probability of success lies there and not in some untested theoretical strategy. So it doesn't necessarily surprise me that that's what's happening at the national level. It certainly doesn't surprise me that that's what's happening at the state level in Texas, because that's where the political energy is among the Republican Party. It's where the donor base is. It's where they know their votes are. Politicians dislike uncertainty. I mean, we do mostly as humans, right? But especially politicians. And so they're going to go with something they're pretty sure it's going to work, rather than a strategy that theoretically might work.
Well, Rebecca Dean, Associate Dean of the College of Liberal Arts at UT Arlington and political science professor, we really appreciate all of your insight into this November's election. Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
The immigration debate is back front and center. Caitlin Huey-Burns, CBS News political correspondent, joins us now. Welcome, Caitlin. Thank you so much. So does the White House or Congress have any plans to take action given the controversy of Governor Greg Abbott and Governor Ron DeSantis sending migrants to the vice president's house and Martha's Vineyard?
Well, Jack, right now they are kind of fighting on the political front. They've been calling this a stunt. They've been criticizing it, but they aren't going as far as some others, like Governor Gavin Newsom in California, want them to do, which is to call upon the Justice Department to get involved. Right now, that is not an option on the table. At least that's not what they say that they want to be doing. There are also questions about what the White House and what Congress can do. And a lot of this revolves around the fact that there has not been legislation in Congress to address this, even though there have been calls over the years for some kind of, large immigration bill to address the issues at the border and also address the larger problems in the immigration law as it stands. But that has not been completed. It has not really been started on Capitol Hill. So right now, this is kind of all about the politics. And at this point, Republicans think that this is something that is a winning argument for them heading into the midterm elections, and they're trying to put Democrats on defense on this issue.
I was just going to ask you, speaking of the politics, has there been any indication whether this controversy has hurt the administration politically?
Well, it really depends on which state, which district, which race. Republicans have been really laser focused on a couple of different issues. Top of mind, of course, is the economy and inflation, but immigration also figures to be something that motivates their base of support. And that's why you see governors, and especially in these particular states, taking this kind of action and trying to put this back in the faces, essentially, of Democrats. Whether it is going to be an issue with voters in the middle, that's kind of where the politics comes in. And that's why you see kind of both sides really going at it on this issue. There's also a question about what this does for Republicans. Republicans have made inroads with Latino voters over the years. It was something that really helped them in 2020 and something that they've been touting heading into 2022. Does this alienate Latino voters? Of course, not a monolithic group by any means, and immigration is an issue that doesn't just affect Latino voters, of course. But does this backfire in any sense, or is this a way for them to address certain voters that they want to reach?
I did want to ask you about President Biden's interview with 60 Minutes on Sunday. What has been the reaction since the president told Scott Pelley that he intends to run in 2024, but that it's not set in stone? I mean, who else is being talked about running, given the low popularity numbers for both the president and the vice president?
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of people have been speculating about what exactly that means. He has said over and over again that he intends to run. But what was interesting in that interview is kind of he laid out the logistical things that have to happen if he declares that he is running. Logistical things in terms of setting up a campaign, has consequences for raising money and all sorts of things. But also you have a lot of Democrats wondering, what he will do, and a lot of Democrats being asked, especially in competitive races where Biden could be a drag on their election prospects, whether they want him to run again in 2024. What's interesting here, though, is that you do have a lot of Democrats who would likely be interested in this position, and you're seeing moves being made by them in some of these states, although they are giving deference to Biden because he is the leader of the party and he hasn't announced what he wants to do. And if any Democrat were to get ahead of the president, that would make them even more vulnerable heading into these midterm elections. So a lot is kind of riding on how these midterms shape up. If Democrats do better than expected, does that stave off some of these Democrats who may be interested in challenging Biden, or at least coming up to the fore? That remains to be seen. And if Democrats take a beating in the House and the Senate and in some of these governor's races as well, does that give Democrats a little more license to say, hey, maybe it's time to change course? So a lot will be riding on these races. But you do have people trying to boost their national profile on these key issues. Gavin Newsom comes to mind in California. He's been wading into these fraught national issues on abortion and immigration, especially lately.
A lot to watch. Caitlin Huey-Burns, CBS News political correspondent, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. And be sure to see more of the latest political reporting tonight on the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell right here on CBS 11 at 5:30 p.m. There's a political rematch from 2018 happening in Dallas County this November as Republican Faith Johnson seeks to unseat Democrat John Creuzot as district attorney. Creuzot defeated Johnson 4 years ago, who was district attorney at the time. We asked her why she's running again.
I'm running because the people need a DA who's going to uphold her oath and follow the law. I tell folks everywhere I go, I plan to make certain that the people of Dallas County are safe and secure. They do not feel safe. They do not feel secure. And they don't feel like they got a DA that cares about them. And I say to them, I care about you. I care about you. I care about your family. I care about your fortune. And I care about your future. And that's why I'm running, to make a change in Dallas County, because that change is so needed.
Well, why do you say people don't feel safe? What are they telling you?
They're telling me that they feel that the crime has gone up, and it has. When we look at our data, the data that we're getting from the different stats is so contrary to the data that the current DA and other people are putting out. And I say to folks, hey, if you don't want to listen to me and you don't want to listen to him, listen to the news, listen to the gunshots outside of your door, because people, it's a contradiction in terms of what I say and what he says as it relates to what's happening. And people feel it. See, we don't really have to tell them that crime is on the rise. We don't really have to tell them that. They see it. They see it on the news. They see it in their communities. And they want somebody to do something about it. The way they see it now, they feel that the current DA is allowing the criminals to get away in such a way that it impacts the victims. They feel that he's causing the criminals to be in a better shape in the sense that he's taking care of them and not taking care of criminals and not taking care of the victims.
So how would you do better?
First of all, I plan to uphold my oath. First thing I'm going to do when I get in office is to get rid of that, reinstate prosecuting theft cases under 750. A lot of people think that, some people think that, oh, well, theft, you want to steal $750, that's no big deal. But Jack, for a lot of people, it's a big deal. I mean, if you came up to me right now and tried to take $100 from me, I might fight you a little bit. So if you're talking about taking $750 from these shop owners, and a lot of these shop owners are right here in South Dallas, they're in DeSoto, they're in Cedar Hill, and they can't afford for somebody to come into their store and steal up to $750. Exactly, $749.99. He's not prosecuting those cases. So what has happened is that he has created this atmosphere of almost like a loose law and order, that people feel like they can do whatever they want, however they want to do it. And as a result of that, it does impact all cases. And it got to change. And people need that change. People want that change.
So let me ask you, you are a Republican.
Yes, I am.
And you've opened the office here in South Dallas County. Can a Republican win?
Absolutely. I'm winning. The reason why I'm winning is because people, and that's what's so interesting. People, and it doesn't matter whether you're Democrat or Republican, they do not like crime. Democrats, Republicans, and independents asked me to run again because they're saying they did not like all these policies that's going forth under the DA's office at this time, the current DA. The current DA. So people want somebody to feel, they want somebody in office who feel like they really matter. They want somebody to take care of them. They want somebody to be able to prosecute cases in the appropriate situation. They want that. They don't want a DA that's really soft on crime. And the reason why we know that, look at what happened in San Francisco. San Francisco is 90% Democrat, and they recalled that DA in San Francisco. And Dallas County is heading, if it's not already there, heading to be another San Francisco or Chicago or Detroit or a New York City. And I say, and the people are saying, nope, enough is enough. Faith Johnson, we want you in office as our Dallas County District Attorney.
Is it enough? Are there enough people, do you believe, where they feel it's that bad that it's reason enough to vote Creuzot, your opponent, out?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Really, when you think about it, people love what I did when I was DA in 2017 and 2018.
So then why didn't you win that?
Because of the straight party ticket back in 2018. And we don't have straight party ticket in 2022. And people now have had the opportunity to experience the current DA. And they don't like his policies. They don't like what he's doing. See, they didn't know that he was going to do a lot of the things that he ended up doing. And so many people have said to me, "Babe, man, I voted for that man the last time. I had no idea he was going to do the kinds of things that he did." And I am totally, and I'm quoting them, I am totally upset and against putting him back in office. So we got a lot of voters who voted for him last time, do not like his policies, do not feel that he has the victim as a priority in his playbook, and they are totally against putting him back in office.
So what are your priorities? You talked about one of them, reinstituting the policy on theft, but what are your other priorities?
My first priority is doing that. Come January 1st, 2023 at 12:01 a.m., I'm reinstating the policy of prosecuting theft cases under $750. I just say to shop owners, just hold your horses, I'm coming. Number two, One of the things that Creuzot is known for is not prosecuting capital murder cases for death. Now, we need to do that under proper circumstances. When you look at the Shamir case, I mean, over what was it, 13 or 18 people were killed, and he did not seek the death penalty on that kind of case. And I think that that's why we have that law, to be able to seek the death penalty under certain circumstances. Obviously, you don't do it all the time. In fact, you might do it 0.5% of 0.5% of 0.5%. But in some cases, we got to do it. I'm on the Texas Board of Criminal Justice, and we had a guy that he was serving a life sentence for capital murder, and he got out and he killed 3 more people, a grandfather and his 2 kids. So that's part of the criteria in terms of whether or not you plan to prosecute somebody for capital murder death. So I plan to do that. I did hear today that he's okay with capital murder cases, but it's my understanding that based on some of the things that I know, that he's trying to undo even cases that was not even under his tenure, under his administration, that he's trying to undo in terms of capital murder. But I do want to do that. Number 3, I believe in second chances, Jack. In fact, you know that because I was the one that started this function program in Dallas County so that people can get a fresh start. No one had done that before me. I started that program so cases can get dismissed under the law. There's certain kinds of cases that can be dismissed, and people didn't know about it. I brought that to the attention of the people of Dallas County. So that's one of the things I'm excited about, that he didn't get rid of that program that I started. I believe in second chances. However, I do not believe in unlimited chances. What I'm hearing from the judges and from the people, even defense lawyers and prosecutors, that people can come back time and time and time again and commit new offenses, and they're still given another probation. They could, in fact, one judge told me a guy had come back 7 times, and the offer was still probation. So my point is, when is enough is enough? So in essence, you've given a criminal an opportunity to go back and victimize 6 more victims if we had not handled him in the beginning. So I plan to, yes, give second chances. I believe in it, and we're going to do that, but we're not going to have unlimited second chances. And one of the other things I want to do, I want to reinstate my homeless program. That program was great. I plan to enhance it. I plan to add some more components to it, because when you look at homelessness and mental health, those issues are very prevalent in Dallas County. So those are some of the things I want to try to handle also when I come back.
Let's go back to what you said before as far as the probation, the problem people are getting, or basically you're talking about a revolving.
Yes.
What were those judges Dallas County judges?
Yeah, I'm talking about Dallas County judges.
So, but don't the judges bear some of the responsibility for this as well?
Well, the judges do bear the responsibility, but when they can all what they call not take a plea. They cannot accept a plea bargain. And you have some judges down there who's brave enough not to do that. But when you have the DA who is constantly saying, no, probation, we're recommending probation. We're not opposed to probation. We want you to give them probation. So, the judges sometimes don't want to always be known to always bussing what they call it a plea. But the key is the DA has a responsibility to make certain that the people of Dallas County are safe and secure. Actually, I'm the lawyer for the victim. I'm not the lawyer for the defendant. The defendant has his lawyer. He has a defense attorney, his only private attorney, a public defender. He has an attorney. So the only person in that courtroom that's representing the victim is the DA. So we got to say, no, we don't want probation in this case. We've given you a second chance. We may have even given you a third chance. But to give you 6 and 7 and 8 and 9 and 10 chances, is unacceptable.
Was there any case that stands out?
Well, there are some cases and some of the judges, and I want to invite you to go and talk to some of those judges down there and let them tell you, so it's not a hearsay from Faith Johnson, you got the information yourself. And I'll give you some of those names that you can go and talk to some of those judges and they'll tell you their own experience, and they can give you names of cases where they have been there in court, taken a plea, and the guy has been back 6 and 7 times. I will give you those judges, and I invite you to go and talk to those judges personally.
Let me ask you about your homeless program. What specifically would you do? I know the current DA has decriminalized homelessness and has had programs to try to help the homeless avoid getting into criminal situations. Would you do something differently?
I think the whole homeless issue is our issue. It's us coming together as a community. One of the things we know about Dallas County, we got so many wealthy people, so many billionaires here, so many millionaires here, and these people, you may not have them all, but you got a nice little sum of millionaires and billionaires who's willing to put their money where their mouth is. They don't want homeless either. They're willing to help fund some of the things that I want to do. One of the main things I want to do, I would love to do tiny homes. They're doing tiny homes down in Austin. It's working so effectively. And when you look at those tiny homes, see, that's the difference between going into a shelter and having your own place. Because we say to homeless people, you are a citizen of this county just like everybody else. We want you to survive. We want you to make it just like everybody else. We want you to have your own place. And what I love about those tiny homes, it gives them their own little space, an opportunity to have, in their minds, some kind of self-respect, and they're not in a shelter with another 100 or 200 or 300 people using the same shower and the same bathroom. They got their own home, just their own little component. And another thing about that, those tiny homes is the wraparound services. Because when you really look at homelessness, you got to look at all the other issues that go right along with that. So in your little tiny homes, you dealing with some of the mental illness, you dealing with drug abuse, because that too you will find in the homeless population. So you just can't say we're going to give you a home. We also have to say we got to give you some services.
On that, isn't that a function really more of, Dallas County or even the city of Dallas, where most of the homeless are? How is that a function of the DA's office?
It's not a function in the sense that we do it, but we can work with them, because that's really what it's a partnership. That's what I did with my diversion program. I was working with the city of Dallas. So, but we wanted to be able to have a part in that, to see how we can also make it where homeless people can still get a job. And a lot of those cases that they had, we dismissed those cases once they went through the program. That's part of the diversion program. So what you're doing is you helping them, not me personally, but at least I'm at the table and I can help bring different partners to the table to make a difference in the lives of our homeless population.
A couple other questions. As far as we hear a lot about gun crimes, and I'm wondering, there's obviously a lot of people who say after Uvalde, they've got to change, the state has to change the gun laws. On the other side, you have those saying, we have a whole bunch of gun laws, how about enforcing them? I'm wondering, where are you on this as an issue, and is there more room on the local level to go after criminals who have guns?
And that's my position too, is that we do have a lot of laws on the book as it relates to the gun issue. And part of the problem is, I've been going around talking to a lot of the police chiefs, and one of their problems is that they can literally arrest somebody who's a dope dealer, and they got a gun, they got the scale, they got all of that. And the cases aren't getting prosecuted the way they ought to be prosecuted. So the guy has a gun, he has the scale, he has the dope, meaning he has the drugs. But the cases are not being properly prosecuted.
By
the current DA.
Or the DA?
The current DA. In fact, I had at least 3 chiefs to talk to me about that's part of their frustration. And so we got to be able to enforce the laws. So that's going back to the point you made. There are laws on the book. Let's enforce them. If criminals believe that you're not going to do anything to them and you're just going to slap them on their hands, they're going to continue to do what they're doing. They got to know that we really do mean business. They got to know that we're not putting them over victims. And that's what I believe the current DA is doing. He is allowing the criminals to run free and feel like there's no consequences to their actions. And we can't allow that to happen anymore. I say to people everywhere I go, I say, I want to be home by 8 o'clock. I used to say 9, but now it's getting dark at 8. I say, I want to be home by 8 o'clock because you just don't know what's going to happen. Because and not that criminals wait until nighttime to do what they do it throughout the day, but usually at night a whole lot of things come out of the woodworks. And I just say to them, I want to be home because we just don't know what we're going to experience. So we got to enforce the law. That's why I say to people, I'm running to be your DA. I'm committed to upholding my oath. I'm committed to following the law. Yes, I believe in helping. I believe in second chances. But most important to me, the priority ought to be making certain that the people of Dallas County are safe and that they feel safe. Because right now, Jack, they don't feel safe. And it doesn't matter which part of the county you live in. You can live in North Dallas, South, East. They don't feel safe.
My last question to you is, what is your path to victory?
My path to victory is to get every vote that I can get. I'm going after every vote, Jack. I'm going after Republican votes, Democrat votes, independents. I'm not catering to any particular, I'm not focusing on, that's probably a better word. I'm not focusing on any particular group because when you look at the DA, I represent everybody. It doesn't matter where you live. It doesn't matter if you live in North Dallas, South, East, West. It doesn't matter if you're young or old, rich or poor. It doesn't even matter whether you're a Democrat or Republican or independent. I'm committed to representing you to the fullest. And what I found out here on the campaign trail, neither Democrats or Republicans love the idea that crime is going up. They all feel it. Democrats as well as Republicans, they feel the fact that crime is going up, and it is. And you've got to have somebody who get in there, who's going to get it under control. Now, some people say, well, the DA has nothing to do with crime. That's the police. But if you have policies in place that allow people to go out there and commit crime and violate the law, and you're not going to do anything about it as the DA, then you are perpetuating the criminal, what people have said is the law, in order, lack of it in this county. And as a DA, I don't want to be a part of causing the disorder in our county. I want to be that DA that bring back a sense of peace, civility to our county, and that's what I'm committed to. I'm committed to upholding my oath. I want to do that. And my number one concern will be the people of Dallas County. I'm committed to caring for you. I'm committed to making you safe. I'm committed to making certain that you're secure. I'm committed to making certain that the laws of this state and of the United States are followed. That's why I'm the DA. I'm not a congressperson or a legislator. If I chose to be that, then I can go around and I can change some of the laws as a legislator, as a congressperson. But as a DA, that's what you took an oath to do, to abide by the laws of this country and of this state. That's what the oath is all about. And as your attorney, that's what I do as a DA. I'm the attorney for the victim because the defendant has his attorney. The victim is out there all by themselves right now. They don't really have anybody watching over them. And I tell them, hold on, I'm coming. I will be watching over you.
Faith Johnson, thank you so much. We appreciate your time.
You're welcome, you're welcome.
As you heard, Johnson criticized Creuzot's record. He responds and explains why he believes voters should re-elect him.
Well, we had a platform that we ran on, and we had certain things that we said we would implement, and we did. Number one, we looked at the racial disparity on the arrest, misdemeanor marijuana arrest. And as you know from the research, 91 to 95% every year, people of color. Those arrests and jailings take up to 5 to 6 hours, where police officers aren't available to make 911 calls. So the inequity based on race was one reason we stopped prosecuting those cases. And also, as you see, police response times are improving. So that was a benefit for the average citizen. And we've had a study done by SMU, an independent study that shows that, number one, it worked, and number two, it had nothing to do with violent crime. There's no changes in violent crime. There never was any relationship between misdemeanor marijuana and violent crime. We have taken an evidence-based approach to running this office. As I gave you, we recently did an evaluation of our mental health diversion program, which is something that I promised to do. And instead of a 50 to 70% recidivism rate, ours is down to 20. So that means that people are not leaving here and leaving these programs and committing new offenses. We have worked with the county and the judges in reference to how probation violations are handled. We're becoming much more efficient and fair on that, and that's an initiative from this office. And today we have 100 fewer people in jail for that category, probation violations. So we're not filing on people for not doing their community service, being too poor to pay their fees and things. It's having a positive impact. The other thing is I promised to focus on mental health and homelessness. And of course, having been on the city's former committee for homelessness, I've become very familiar with the issue, and we led and initiated the building of what's now called the Dallas County Deflection Center. And so instead of taking that category of individual, a homeless and mentally ill person on a very low-level offense, to jail, where, as you've seen recently, people are stacked up, hundreds of them in jail because they're incompetent and they need to go to a state hospital. Well, we've got another program that's community-based, and they get the services. We just opened it up. It's a Parkland grade facility. It was the first clinic in that portion of Oak Cliff, and so we're working on that. We have lots of hope for it. We also promised to be honest about conviction integrity. We've had some exonerations since I've been in office, but a lot of this is designed to give focus and primacy to violent offenses, and I've given you the numbers of how we have focused on violent offenses, especially murder and capital murder. And I think, as I gave you, if you take from the time I got into office till just recently, I mean, we've actually processed 681 capital murder or murder cases. Our number is very robust on sex assaults, especially sex assaults of children. I don't have that. But we are targeting the people who hurt us the most and holding them accountable. And we're doing a better job than any other administration has ever done. So I think it's a combination of things. Well, I look back and saw, for example, the conviction rate in 2018 and 2017 was 87%. Our conviction rate for this year is 93%. And for example, I don't know if you know this, but last week we tried 4 cases, murder and capital murder, and each one was a guilty and a life sentence. And so what we've done is focused, especially, I'm a trial lawyer. I mean, that's the way I came up in the DA's office. And I was a trial court judge. And so I made it clear to the staff that we're not plea lawyers, we're not cop-out lawyers, we're trial lawyers, and that these people need to be held accountable. They need to be put to trial and let the judge or jury do whatever. But that's our focus And that's what we've done. And so I think it's been successful. I think that, honestly, this office is the best run office that it has ever been, regardless of who the predecessors were, because we work with academics just like our police chief. In fact, we work with those UT San Antonio people. We work with others, and we're actually joining in to his crime reduction plan, certain parts of it. Now, we don't control what happens on the streets. We don't have anything to do with 911 calls. However, when it comes down to understanding the cases and prosecuting them, we're right there with them. And some of the future aspects of their violent crime reduction plan is focused deterrence. And we have already begun our relationship with, for example, Garland Police Department. We're already looking to see who is likely to commit a violent offense. And so what we have as a Garland, especially, a non-law enforcement at their choice, non-law enforcement intervention with the person and the family, offer services, offer a way out. And we're having some success in the early stages, but people are responding and we're having some success. And we hope to expand that, but of course we're also going to do it with the city of Dallas, and we've already begun those efforts.
So what exactly is that? So you said a person who's at risk for committing a violent crime?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So academia has looked across, if we can tell that someone's at risk, not that we know. Now, one of the things, we did a back look at all the people who we would have looked at, and academia showed us that about 30% we wouldn't have known about because people just do things. But the purpose of it is to look back for certain things. Have they been involved in a robbery, an armed robbery? Have they recently been engaged with guns and things? There's certain things we're looking for. And not for all of their lives, but in recent times. And what academia has done is lined up some of these variables with people who are at high risk to commit a crime. And so it's my belief that if I do nothing as a district attorney, but prosecute cases, the crime has occurred. I mean, the harm has occurred. And so what we're trying to do, and the police chiefs in this community, especially two, at an initial phase, is we're trying to figure out how to get in front of this and communicate to these individuals and their families so that we can stop the violence or whatever it is that they might do. Now, sometimes they don't respond, sometimes it doesn't work, okay? We're in the beginning phases, but where it has been implemented faithfully and according to the research, it has worked well, and it has reduced violent crime. As you know, Dallas is the only major metropolitan area in the United States where violent crime is actually going down. I don't know if you had a chance to see that the other day.
Well, I looked at the statistics this morning, and the latest statistics show, as of Monday, on the city's website, that...
I haven't looked at it that recently, so
okay,
go ahead.
That's all
yeah.
right. But murders are still up a little
Yes, yes, they are.
And so that's the most violent, but yes, there are others categories that are down.
Yes.
But, you know, the crime in Dallas really went up in 2019, went up in 2020, came down in 2021.
Yes.
I mean, they're trying to get it down through the chief's violent crime program. But it's still a problem. And so what is your message to voters who are considering you and your opponent in November?
Well, first of all, let's go back to my opponent's years, 2017 and 2018. Violent crime, there was none of it going down. It was all going up, okay? And what I never mentioned that in the campaign in 2018 because the DA's office tries cases. That's what we do. These murders, rapes, robberies, all that stuff. We're going to try a case 1, 2, 3, 4 years later. And then what happened? We lost a police chief, Renee Hall. There was another police chief who came in with an actual plan that, as you know, is continually unfolding, and it's showing great promise. So the district attorney's office does not respond to 911 calls. If you call and nobody shows up, that's on a local police department, not us. What we work with them to do is get the quality of the cases as high as we can, the most amount of evidence, so that we can have a successful prosecution. And that's called accountability. I seriously doubt that anybody who's going to commit a murder this upcoming week, and hopefully none, but if so, really understood that we tried 4 cases last week and got life sentences for people who caused death. And so there's not a one-to-one relationship between trying cases and a reduction in crime. Where the real one-to-one comes in is the quality of the policing that goes on. For example, let's take Deep Ellum. You know, there's a rise in a lot of crimes over there. Okay, what's the response? The DA's office doesn't have a presence there, but the police do. And in fact, they're increasing it. And if you've lived here long enough, you know, Lower Greenville, which is pretty good right now, but at the beginning, because I was a judge and I was trying the cases, okay, there was a lot of crime there. What happened? They rearranged things. I don't know if that was the best police response, but at times the businesses had different responses. The police had more presence. The crime went down. So this focused deterrence is trying to get in front of that. But as far as what happens on the street and whether or not crimes occur, I think we are learning and understanding based on this new police chief and his methodology and the acceptance of it by the mayor and the city council that's more impactful on the reduction in crime. If we try a case 1, 2, 3, 4 years later, that doesn't stop what happened from happening. It happened. And so we're holding people accountable.
I interviewed your opponent, Faith Johnson, who you beat 4 years ago. Why do you think that it's going to be the same result this time?
Well, I don't know that it will be the same result. I would never guess that. I learned a long time ago not to guess a lot of things, outcomes of cases, what judges and juries will do, and to predict an election. So I don't know, but I think we'll win. And I think that this community is more in tune with my vision of criminal justice. When we talk about marijuana, for example, she wants to go back to the arrest and prosecution. Now she calls it a memo agreement. And I think that gives a false impression, because you can get a memo agreement, but let me tell you what happens before, which is what you know from the data from the SMU study we're making tremendous progress on. What happens before that and what happened in the past until now is that people of color have been targeted for traffic stops. If that police officer stops that person, searches the car, finds some small, it's usually 1 or 2 cigarettes of marijuana, okay, they're going to arrest them, they're going to call for a record, they're going to take them to jail, and that's from the police, a 4 to 5 to 6 hour process. Well, let's think about that. If a person has an 8-hour shift and you call 911 because you have a crisis at your home, okay, they're not going to respond because they're in jail booking in some kid, mostly a person of color, and they're not going to be able to do that. So even the police chief changed the rules when he got in. One of the first things he did was 2 ounces of marijuana or less. He said, unless it's for recreational if it's for recreational, don't take it. There are a few exceptions which align with our exceptions, by the way, and let them go. So when we see violent crime reduced in the city of Dallas, okay, we also see 5% fewer arrests. Okay, so what we're not doing is dragnetting neighborhoods. We're focusing on 300 by 300 grids, as you know, and we're focusing on where the criminals are and where they commit their crimes. And I think, in fact I know, based on the research that they've done, the presentations that they've made, which I was sitting right behind them at the most recent one, those are the reasons that violent crime is going down in the city of Dallas.
I wanted to ask you about some things that your opponent said yesterday during our interview. She said if she's elected, the minute she gets in, she's going to reinstitute the policy of theft below $750 for the certain items.
Yes.
And so she said that's the first thing that she's going to do, and that shop owners are really wanting that. How do you respond to that? She sees this as a problem and as a choice for people to make.
Well, I mean, first of all, I have talked to the Black Chamber of Commerce. I've talked to the Dallas Chamber of Commerce. We have a very robust and positive relationship with the Texas retailers and national retailers. We meet with their private companies that assist them with theft cases. I was called down to the state Senate on this very issue, okay? And I think I gave you a link to that, okay? There is no evidence that this policy, which she misstates, by the way, okay, has had any impact on the number of those cases or anything else. In fact, that was the first witness in the state Senate, so that was just about over with. The second witness was a police officer who said, we're not even allowed to respond to those types of calls, 911 calls, because we're focused on violent crime. So there are always some other collateral issues out there, and that's been true for a number of years. That's why the number of those cases is low. Our rejection rate is as good as, same as when she was in office. So I think it's a political point. I think it engenders fear. It's designed to be fear-based and not idea-based. And I think that when we look at the data, that we see it's had no impact. And because I said food, diapers, formula, okay? And I said if you're stealing for economic gain, you will be prosecuted. And we have had those, and we prosecute them, okay? But the problem is, now that we have had it, the reason we don't have any increase in cases is because the first $100 is a city municipal offense. And I can't tell you, I haven't heard of any increase. I've talked to police chiefs and mayors across this community, and I've yet to find one that said any policy that we have has caused an increase in crime. So I think that the way this is talked about politically is to engender fear as opposed to what the facts are. I've given you the facts. I've given anybody and everybody the facts. I said I would monitor this. If this causes an increase in crime or has any adverse impact, that we would abandon it. And in fact, what we've seen, it's been neutral. And once again, the reason is the first $100 goes to a municipal court. Okay, it's only $100 to $750, and I suppose, I mean, I don't know, we haven't had any increase in cases. The numbers have been going down for years, even before her. And so all I can say is it has shown no impact, nor are there any data to suggest so. So, to the point, I talked to the Black Chamber of Commerce, the Hispanic, the Dallas Chamber of Commerce. We have called, we've asked, do you have any data or evidence that this has caused any harm to a business, that any economic impact, any negative economic impact? The answer is no. So we continue to work with the Texas retailers, the national retailers. They have independent entities who you never heard of, who work with them and this office to prosecute theft cases. Now, why are they in there when they're the police to respond? Well, because the police don't always get there. And sometimes they're making cases off of security cameras. And so we need that. We need it given to us in a way that we can use it to prosecute it. So there's a lot of coordination between us and the retailers on the issue of theft. But on this particular issue, I have asked, I continue to ask every time we meet or talk or on the phone, is this policy having any negative impact on anybody that you know? And the answer is consistently no, it has not.
Another thing that she had mentioned was her difference of opinion on death penalty cases. She said you haven't filed any death penalty cases since you've entered office. And she mentioned, as an example, the Shamir case, which I know he received life in prison. And so I'm wondering, what is your response to that?
Well, number one, he will die in prison because he will never get out. So I think when people say about death penalty, they need to realize that what the option here is, the only other option according to law, is that they'll die in prison. So that's where Mr. Shamir will be until he dies, number one. Number two, I think she overlooks and does not discuss the actual law. There's a provision in the law that we have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that a person will be a continuing threat to society. Well, if they have an automatic life sentence, the courts have said society also means prison. So we look back individually on cases, okay, and see, do we have any evidence from prior incarcerations, current incarceration, et cetera, that this person fits that category? Because if you look back at the beginning of the current death penalty statute in the state of Texas, it was designed for that person who not only is obviously violent on the streets, but also would be violent in a penal society. And I take that very seriously. That's the law. Some of the cases we've tried handled without death penalty, the family didn't want it. They did not want to go through 20, 25 years. I think she does not recognize and won't talk about the cost that it is. I mean, we can put somebody away, they'll never hit the streets again, and save about $4 or $5 million. That case will never make it to the United States Supreme Court or through the federal courts, which these cases, because you don't work here, I do, you don't know, these cases bounce back and forth, even with ridiculous issues. We have to tell the family that this guy wants a monk next to him before he's executed, and they won't allow it, so the whole thing's been put off again. And so there are a number of reasons why I think this is the most efficient, effective, and I've never said I won't. I've always said I would consider it, and we do consider it, but if we don't have the facts, many people are mentally ill that come through with these types of cases, and that in and of itself is going to give you 10 to 15 years of litigation. And we've had many cases reversed on that issue, that the conviction was affirmed, but the sentence, because of intellectual disability, mental retardation, etc., we just have a hard time getting to the point where the person and that case can go through for an execution. It's more complicated than people realize, and very costly to do this.
Is this a case where, you know, it's a message thing? You know, if you have a case in which there is a death penalty, is the message out to the community, you know, of deterrence?
No, there's no evidence of that. In fact, Mr. Shamir Mir was committing his crimes when she was in office. People have been executed in the state of Texas in the last few years. That didn't stop Mr. Shamir Mir from doing a thing, okay? And there is no data or evidence that anyone has ever pointed to that executing one person stops some other crime.
I wanted to ask you about an issue that's come up recently in the OD mapping, which is something that you're pushing. Why is this so important? And why hasn't this been done in a city like Dallas?
Well, your last question, I don't know the answer to. I can tell you that the former U.S. Attorney, Aaron Neely Cox, was working on it before 2019 when I got in office. I don't know to what, if any extent, she worked with Ms. Johnson on it. I don't know. But it's a federal initiative. She, of course, COVID came, she left office after Trump lost the election. And so when we started coming back to work, I refocused on it with our executive director of the Texoma HIDTA, High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area. And we well, first of all, we called many police chiefs who said yes, 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 yes. Now, that's a city and a technology issue, so, but we need them on board. And after about a dozen of those phone calls, we said, okay, we're looking good. We just assume the rest are going to want to do it. But the biggest city, half our cases, and the vast majority of the known overdose deaths, just the known ones, come out of the city of Dallas. And so really what we need to do is get the city on. So we started, he and I, communicating to the fire chief, to the city attorney, to the police staff, et cetera. And so we finally got it, and the mayor. And the mayor has taken it and really run with it, which is commendable, and we thank him. And so we recently had a hearing in front of public safety, and the issue has become one of a legal issue of confidentiality, and the mayor has, I don't know if you know this, but
He's written to the HHS secretary.
yes, so he's written that letter. We hope to get a quick answer, okay? We think since it's a federal program that they would obviously, yes, it's okay, that there's nothing here to compromise a person's confidentiality. So in case you don't know, the information, what will happen is they'll put a computer up to the police computer, to the fire department computer, or if they have an outside contractor, they'll put it up to that. They'll put it up to Parkland, to the hospitals. They'll put it up to the ME's office, and they'll extract certain information, and then they strip all identifying information, including an address. It just gives kind of a broad coordinate of where it is. But what it allows us to do, and which is just, I can't believe that in 2022 we're getting to this, is it allows us to understand where in the community overdoses are happening and whether they're deaths, and also what is the drug. Now, what we have a lot of right now is heroin and fentanyl. As you know, fentanyl is being made mostly outside of this country. It's coming in various ways, in various places, and I think that the way it's packaged to look like a benign drug or some other drug that maybe somebody can get high off of, but it has a lethal dose. It's my opinion, based on what I see, and I don't have any disagreement with my law enforcement partners on that, that people are trying to kill Americans. It comes in looking like Adderall. Well, okay, if you take fentanyl, you're not taking Adderall. Now, some of it is hydrocodone. You know you're taking something that's an opiate, but you don't know that you have a fatal dose of fentanyl in there. So I think that it's high time. We've seen too many deaths. the numbers that we know are outrageous, and we need to get on top of this, get in front of it, and try to save people in this community.
My last question to you is, since Uvalde, there has been a state conversation and a national conversation. On one hand, you have those who say the state needs to pass new laws, tougher restrictions on gun sales. Yes. On the other hand, you have those who say there are already plenty of laws on the books for gun enforcement. If you're breaking the law and you have a gun, go after somebody. Where are you on this issue, and do you think that there is an opportunity to get tougher on gun crimes locally?
Yes, well, first of all, we have a very robust plan, and we do, and I can give you the numbers here of our prosecution of gun crimes. 76% since I've been in office of the gun crimes that we have prosecuted have been firearmed by a felon. Okay, so we're fully engaged in that and want to hold people accountable. Judges have options as to what they want to do with them, but we're engaged in it 100%. The larger kind of political picture and what to do, I've held town hall meetings with Moms Demand Action, and what they are is a gun safety group, not a gun confiscation group. I don't believe that would ever happen. I don't know if there are any circumstances that would be palatable in this state for that, but we can make guns safer. The other thing, and I think if you go back and look, you'll see that the most recent round of legislation from 2021 that expanded availability of guns to the average person, I think if you go back and look, you're going to see many police officials, especially Eddie Garcia, asking the legislature not to do that. More guns on the street create more crimes on the street. I think it probably creates more unlawful possession of a firearm by felons, because the word is you need a gun. You can have a gun. And so even those who legally shouldn't, they don't make those distinctions. And oftentimes, as we know, we just have a lot of guns. Guns are stolen in robberies. Guns are stolen from gun stores, and those wind up out here in the stream of commerce to be sold, but they also wind up to be used, and unfortunately we have to handle those cases. There are many times that we can track the registration of a gun and see that it was a stolen gun. We don't know who stole it, and it may be a year or 2 or 3 when it's used. But once again, I think that we should be more thoughtful about what we're going to do on this. The national government has recently passed an act. I think that, to be honest with you, it's very disturbing, I think, to everyone about the mentally ill in possession of guns. I think the last story you and I did was the lady from Love Field. I mean, with that history of mental illness, what's she doing with a gun? Well, she probably got it off the black market, okay? And so we have guns out there like that. And we do have significant offenses where severely mentally ill people are using guns in ways to either kill or almost kill or threaten innocent individuals. And of course, they're so mentally ill, as you've seen recently, they get kind of stuck in jail because the state has not funded the state hospitals, and so we can't, the judges, and I don't have anything to do with it, but the judges order them to the facilities, and we can't get them there. And so they're sitting in jail just as mentally ill as when they got here, and that's a tragedy on all sides. The victims, them, and we can't hold them accountable or find out if they're insane unless they become competent to stand trial. So it's a difficult issue. It's not an easy one to resolve.
Dallas County District Attorney John Creuzot, thank you for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
That's Eye on Politics this week. We thank you for spending time with us. I'm Jack Fink. You're watching CBS News, Dallas-Fort Worth.